Welcome back to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. Ever wonder what's going on in your guitar instructor's head when you show up to your lesson and say, "Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to practice this week"? Well, today we're going to peel back the curtain and we're going to show you the truth in all of its glory. Thanks for listening.
One thing I just want to make sure is very clear that I really intend on adding nothing of value to this conversation. As long as you know that walking in, I think we're going to be good.
That's okay. Well, I mean, right. I thought you were prepared for me to not offer anything of value in the conversation.
That's
I thought that's kind of was like our jumping off point for every episode.
Didn't realize that I was supposed to bring something to the table. Sorry, man. I should have prepared. I don't know why I didn't.
Well, that's going to change today.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Rock Guitar Confidential with
Scott Allen and
Ryan Bowe.
I'd be Scott and he's Ryan. I'm pretty sure that's the way it works here.
I think that's still the case. Yep. And we're here to talk about all things music from our very interesting perspective.
I mean, I don't know how interesting our perspective. I'll be honest with you. I think it's kind of pretty.
You know what? As long as I think our perspective is interesting,
that's true. I support our self delusions. It's amazing. But hopefully you will enjoy this today. What we're going to talk about in this podcast is just rock guitar. It's going to be music in general. Ryan and I are both professional musicians in terms of we teach, we do sessions, we do gigs. So we'll have some teacher perspectives. We'll have some learning music perspectives. We'll have some general music and culture perspectives, gear, all that kind of stuff. So today's topic is what, Ryan?
Well, we're gonna roll out what I hope becomes perhaps a recurring segment.
All right. So this is the inaugural segment.
The inaugural edition of what I like to call Teacher Talk.
That's true. You know what's funny? I have a coffee right here. It's perfect. Teacher Talk with a coffee.
Excellent. Yes. Well, you won't need that coffee because this is going to be thrilling.
It's true. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah. So you and I both spend a lot of time as music educators.
That's true.
Guitar instructors specifically.
Yep. I mean, I teach bass as well. We try not to talk about that, but yeah, I do.
Yeah, those lessons must be short.
Yeah. It's basically just me pleading with them to change their mind and play guitar.
That's basically.
You I always tell them sorry, you're better than this. You should aim higher. You don't have to settle for playing bass. There's a future for you. You don't have to give up like this.
Don't give up.
Yeah, exactly. The guitar is so close, man. It's just two more strings. You can do this.
Just don't stop believing.
Yeah, I know exactly. It's true.
Absolutely.
And then I send them my love, and then they look at the lights.
Yes.
And then
yes. Well, that's very patient of you.
It's true. So,
but
now, as far as the teacher talk, what I'm always hoping we could talk about is just kind of what our philosophies of teaching are and like how we think. What does a good guitar teacher look like to someone looking for lessons?
Yeah, that's good.
So
I like that a lot. Well, a good guitar teacher looks like either you or me.
We're the only two that exist. I'm pretty sure there's no other teachers who are any good except for Ryan Bowe and Scott Allen. It means if you're not living in Sacramento, California, you're just completely out of luck. I'm sorry. There's no other good teachers anywhere.
Yeah, right. No.
But no, what I would say is that there's your average guitar teacher that you walk into any music store to take lessons from is going to be just whoever they could bring in the door. They could vaguely play guitar and can be a warm body sitting in a chair to sit there with your kid for a half hour. That's what most guitar teachers are.
Certainly, if you're going to a corporate-owned
big box
establishment
type,
or a franchise.
But a lot of times teachers, though, I find they're so self-interested too. Like, where they'll just say, "Hey," I mean, I remember this when I was a kid, especially taking lessons. I got this a lot, which is, "Hey, man, so what do you want to learn?" I'm like, well, you're the teacher. You tell me what I need to learn.
Do some teaching.
Yeah,
Start teaching.
It's not up to me at age 12 to decide what I'm going to learn. You should be guiding me on this. And
which, to be fair, that's not the same question as, "Hey, so what are you into?"
Yes. I always ask this question: what kind of goals do you have? Like, what do you want to do with your playing? And so if someone walks in and says something like, "Oh, I want to be a great soloist," or "I want to be a great singer-songwriter," or "I want to be able to play funk guitar," or something like that, that gives me, I'm going to still teach the same fundamentals no matter what, because all music has the same fundamental base.
Yes.
You got to understand harmony, chords, rhythm, technique. You have to know those things. Reading, maybe, depending on what your goals are. You have to know those things to be a competent musician. And then you can go and really get specialized if that's what that person's desire is. They want to learn how to play funk guitar. Okay, well, let's learn our fundamentals first so we can apply to all styles. And then we'll focus in on funk guitar once you have that foundation laid. So the idea of, okay, let's learn this funk song is the first thing you show somebody, but they don't know how to play a G chord. that's a problem. You should really
Right.
start with the fundamental stuff first and then work your way to that. I think a lot of times guitar teachers are just like, well, I want to do whatever it takes to make this person come back in the door next week. So I'm going to just show them what they want to see, and then I'm not really worried about whether that's right for them or not.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's a lot of guitar teachers. The ones who are like at least competent, who can teach, are those guys. And then there's guys like us, I think, like maybe speak for both of us, where we really take our students' education to heart. Like we know what's the best thing for them, and you need to walk this path to become a good guitar player.
Absolutely.
You don't have to play like I play or like Ryan plays, but you definitely need to have some basic fundamentals under your hood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, without a doubt. In fact, every first lesson I give essentially the same speech. And it basically goes something like this.
Does it start with four score?
Yes, it does.
I love it.
Four score and 7 years
ago. A fortnight ago, we came here.
Chip, chip, tree. Yeah, so, right, yeah, dude, yep, absolutely. I give my own Gettysburg Address. And, it basically goes, hey, listen, every week I'm going to give you a project. And that project is going to be focused on one of these 3 aspects of you as a musician that we're trying to grow. So the project will fit into one of these 3 categories. The first is called fundamentals. Mm-hmm. If your fundamentals are strong, then it doesn't matter what style of music you're trying to play or what your goals are.
And that's going to be really awesome because everyone knows you can't spell fundamentals without fun.
That's right. And we're going to put the fun in fundamentals.
It's true.
And we're going to put the mental in fundamentals.
Because it's going to be mental, man.
That's right, which is always fun. The second category the second category is repertoire, which just means, hey, how many songs do I know?
Yeah, and am I maintaining that song list?
Yes.
Not the song I played 3 months ago once, and then I haven't played since. That's not repertoire. Not
right. It's actually, I've got, my buddy brings his kid by Sunday mornings, mm-hmm. and we've been working on You Shook Me All Night by AC/DC for like a month and a half.
You shook me all month.
Yes, we're shaking, and it could be we're shaking for a few months.
Yeah. That's like a week and a half per chord in that song.
Just about, man. So I think it was a little bit, and actually I told my student, hey, look, we've got a gig coming up in a month. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, we're gonna play for mom and dad. So we've got a gig, man. There's a deadline now. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want to hear, hey, I was busy this week. I didn't have time to practice this week. Like none of that. It's I said I don't care.
Yeah.
I was over at my friend's. Don't care.
Yep. Still have to practice. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Totally. I had to go to school. Don't care.
Yep.
There's at least a half hour available.
Yeah.
And
don't tell me that there's not, like, how much Minecraft time did you spend this week?
Right, well, when I pitch a half hour as that's the time you should spend practicing, I'm always banking on the fact that once they start, it's going to go longer than a half hour.
Hopefully. And half hour is nothing. You can barely get anything done in a half hour.
Well, sometimes when you're starting out, it can take a half hour to tune your guitar, or to not tune your guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Got 3 chords down and a half hour's up. You know what I mean? That's,
right. Yeah. But so we're grinding it out. Right now, he's getting it. Mm-hmm. And,
slow and steady. It's all it is.
Absolutely. I pushed our gig date back a month so I could teach him the intro. Now we're talking about hammer-ons and pull-offs and other techniques that we wouldn't if we had just gone for the basic chord progression of the song. Right, yeah, he got that part pretty quick.
Good.
So I mean, I guess there's just one microcosm of actually synthesizing those 2 categories. The third category, I call it creativity. So we never want to lose sight of the fact that this is a creative pursuit.
And enjoyable, too. There's got to be something where they're squeezing some enjoyableness out of that process. You know what I mean? It's especially for most of our students are recreational players. They're not going to be people who have aspirations of going to music school or becoming a professional musician themselves. So the enjoyment part's got to be there.
Right.
But to me, the enjoyment part comes later. Like once you've gotten your fundamentals down and you have a repertoire and you have technique and you understand proper technique and you understand music up to a certain point, then we can really get into the fun part, because then you've kind of laid all the foundation that you need. And what's cool about that too, I think you and I share this philosophy as far as teaching, is that I want them to get to the point where they don't need me anymore, where they can teach themselves.
Well, that would be a whole other topic. I have actually passed a couple of students on to other teachers this past year.
But I mean, but eventually, hopefully, because once you get to a certain level of understanding, then YouTube becomes an amazing resource, because you have enough fundamental understanding to right away recognize whether someone's full of shit or not. on YouTube.
Most certainly.
And if someone's a terrible instructor, as long as you can steal what they're trying to say, then you can still learn indefinitely because you have a foundation in place.
That's
if
right.
you
can
don't
go buy
know
a method and learn yourself.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have that foundation, though, you can't do that. And I think that it's really, I think my experience as a student when I was a kid, I took lessons for many years, probably 5-6 years before I went to music school. So probably longer than that because I started when I was 10 and I didn't go to music school. I was like 18. So it was like 8 years taking lessons from various people. And the thing I struggled with at that time is I would have a hard time, and this is like 1986, 1987, finding a rock guy who knew anything. That was really hard because I would find like these rock guys who like really cool looking, they have an awesome guitar and they could play. And I would just go, yeah, so I want to be able to do what you do. And they go, yeah, man, check out this lick. Yeah, you should play that. That was like the whole lesson.
Yeah, and then you just become a kid who's got a bunch of
randomness. Exactly.
Randomness or don't know.
And then I would leave that guy and say, well, I want to learn technique and theory. And then I'll go find like a guy. But the only person I could find who knew technique and theory was like a jazz guy who hated rock. And I'll never forget, I had this jazz instructor when I was like probably 13 who didn't even know two-handed tapping. I had to show him how to do two-handed tapping. I'm like, dude, it's like 1988. You don't know two-handed tapping? It's like, how is nobody of your students asking for this? Like, Van Halen's like the biggest thing in the world right now. How do you not know this? And so like that, and the stuff he was teaching me had no application to what I was trying to do.
And that's a tough thing. I mentioned one of the students I passed on this year was, and I'm proud of him. He finally got. We went through, we were doing real book tunes. We got through understanding extensions and all of that stuff. And he just finally got to the point where he needs to be taking lessons with someone who loves jazz.
Yeah, that's because that's where he's coming from.
And that's not me.
Yep.
But that's great, though.
But you gave him that foundation to build on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I'm totally cool with that, right? Yeah. So that's an interesting thing to go through as an instructor.
Well, I think that for me, like my terrible experiences with all my teachers. Well, actually, I'll tell the funny stories. You and I have a friend that's mutual that was my first like good teacher. He was so funny. He's a great player and he knows a lot, but he's not a guy who's a great teacher. So I remember he reminded me like a magic 8-ball. I would ask a question, he would shake the 8-ball, and he would answer that question. And then I would have that information, and the next week I'd ask a different question. It was but it was not a method. I was just picking up random bits of information. But he would give me the right information, but there was like no direction. So all my bad teachers like taught me what not to be as a teacher. Like, what you don't want to do. And then when I went to music school, that's way too intense for your average person to do that kind of. They can't hold them to that level of being able to think to do those things. So I kind of synthesized what I learned in music school and said, okay, what is it that you really need to know? I'm not going to make them sightseeing. We're not going to do reharmonization or that stuff that they're not going to really use, that kind of thing. So let's just get into like what's the meat and potatoes that someone has to do. And then I kind of crystallized into what I call the lesson packet, which is about a 50-page packet that I give all my students. It's got all the chords. It's basically my philosophy is you need to be good. If you ask me what's important to know, you got to know chords and rhythm. Yep. Number one, meaning you understand syncopation, how to count rhythms.
Yep, got to count to 4. I don't know how many times I've come home from a rehearsal and told my girlfriend, I think my mutant superpower is that I can count to 4.
What if you're in 5 though? Is that to negate it? Is that sort of like
in these particular cover band situations, counting
happens.
to 5?
You ever play "Turn It On" by Genesis or like Salisbury Hill or anything?
I wish.
Yeah, that's funny.
I wish.
Anyway, the point I'm trying to make though is that you got to understand chords and rhythm. You got to understand harmony. You can't not know how keys work. You have to understand what a 1-4-5-1 progression is in a major key. You have to understand what a 1-6-3-1 chord progression in minor is and what the difference is. You have to understand 7th chords. You have to understand that. That's super important. You can't because you're not going to all the scale technique in the world is going to do you no good if you don't understand harmony.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I remember, maybe we all. I remember being a young player, being mystified by modes and keys and stuff.
Yeah.
And just for all the listeners out there, if I could just kind of like clear this up, and this is the way I teach it. A key is a scale. A mode is a scale.
It's a harmonized scale, though.
Yes, but just for the student, though.
Oh, okay.
If I say I'm playing in the key of G, it means I'm using the notes of the G major scale.
Yep.
That's what that means.
1 sharp in the key signature.
Right. And the modal name of that is G Ionian.
Yep.
So there. Key, scale, mode. There are important, distinct... But just for the person who's hearing it the first time, I think that dispels a lot of fear over the topics.
Yeah, I think also there's so many people who try and teach shortcuts, and it's like, dude, as soon as someone's offering you a shortcut, I don't care what it is. Like, hey, reverse mortgage, that's a great idea. You know what I mean? Like, that's not gonna be a good idea. Oh, you don't need to work out. There's this pill you take. Just take this, and this is fine. That's never a good idea. No. Hey, man, cryptocurrency. That's what you should be putting your money into. You know, it's like anything that's just like a shortcut, quick fix is going to ought to be first thing you should just do. Is
you know what?
Walk
We're
away.
we're gonna take a song first approach to teaching you music. That's like the cryptocurrency of music education.
It is like the most ridiculous crap. So what I would say is this: if you walk into lessons with a good teacher, they're going to challenge you. They're going to ask you to play things that make you uncomfortable, and they're going to guide you through things that you're going to suck at for a while. But if you keep showing up for work and you keep doing what you're supposed to do, you're going to become a good guitar player. And that's the thing that I kind of take. Like, I assume when you walk in the door to take lessons with me that you are up for the challenge. And, and if you aren't, that's going to reveal itself very quickly. But I'm not going to change my approach because you're uncomfortable.
Yes.
You're going to have to either learn the way I'm showing you, or you're going to go find another teacher. That's kind of the way I look at it. And that's for your own good. I'm not doing it to be a jerk or to kind of like pull power moves or something like that. It's like I know that this is what's got to happen. Now, one thing I would say though, as an instructor, that was very eye-opening for me, and sadly it took me about 3 or 4 years to kind of understand this, is that not everybody who walks through the door wants to be a virtuoso. That took me a really long time to understand that. It's like, because why would you pick up the guitar if you don't want to be the best guitar player who's ever lived? Like, that's why you play guitar.
I wanted to be Randy or Eddie, and I wanted to conquer the world.
My bar was Eddie Van Halen and Yngwie Malmsteen when I started. That's what the bar was. That to be considered a good guitar player.
Like, I'd better start working at this a lot so I can be as good as that.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea of being cool with I'm playing like a Green Day song and that's all I want from guitar was very hard to get my head around.
Some students just want to be at the high school party playing that Green Day
strumming
song.
some chords and
then the guy or gal that they have a crush on comes down the hallway and goes, "Hey, that's Green Day." And then once that happens,
you're such a great guitar player.
Yeah, and then once that happens, it's mission accomplished.
That's true. It was funny though. The irony of that is like when you're like some monster guitar player, like no girl ever gave a shit about it. I do. It's only other guitar players who care about that. It's so funny.
I do remember in my more progressive metal-y days getting tired of playing for rooms full of sweaty dudes.
You know, that's funny. I mentioned I went through a pop phase on a previous podcast. That was the big eye opener. I remember I sat in with my buddy's band. There's this pop band. I ended up joining a different iteration of that band later on. But I would go and hang out because they're my friends, and we would just hang out at their gigs, and I would sit in every once in a while. And I remember looking at the audience and thinking, okay, this audience is 70% 22-year-old hot girls. And I compared it to the,
this was a cover band, right?
It was an original / cover. We did some covers. Okay. We did some covers, and we did half originals, I would say.
That's kind of the holy grail.
But we were playing like John Mayer, Goo Goo Dolls, Matchbox 20, and then we were doing like our stuff, which is kind of similar. It was kind of in that same Dave Matthews kind of world.
But the singing wasn't terrible.
No, it was kind of the singer Rob in that band had a voice that was kind of similar to like I remind me of the guy from like oh my gosh, I can't believe it's based on name. Just like it's very 90s kind of voice, that kind of thing.
Wow, are you still friends?
Yeah, we haven't been buddies in a while, but anyway. The point I'm trying to make though is that was eye opening. Looking at the audience,
those were just kind of harsh words.
I'm sitting here strumming. I'm sitting here strumming away these like chords and just basically not even having to think about it at all when I'm playing. And I'm looking at all the girls just losing their minds. I'm thinking, every show I've done with my band has been a room full of sweaty dudes with their arms folded, staring at me, that kind of thing. And I remember thinking like, well, that's no fun. Like, where are the hot girls? Because hot girls don't give two craps about like, virtuoso guitar playing.
Oh, yeah. Well, so, Misty and I had been together for 14 years, and I met her because I was playing a gig. And the girlfriend I had before that met her because I was playing a gig. Yeah. And just keep on rolling that back. I mean, but they were cover bands.
Yeah, that's funny because I met my wife, same thing. I was sitting with my buddy's church band. Just because he's my friend, and she was like part of that friend group, and the same thing, you know what I mean? I was the lead guitar player, and it's so funny, man. I always find that like whenever you do a show, like when I do a show with my solo band, it's like you'll see everybody who runs up to you after the show is all dudes who play guitar, and at the other place it was like not when I was with that other band years ago, it was very different.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking it was very strange that girls are paying attention to what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, I know. That was a whole different. Yeah.
Anyway, I guess I kind of sidetracked this on that one, but it's amazing to think like as much as you love guitar, it is going to be sort of a thing that maybe those guys had the right idea of not being a virtuoso. So maybe there's something to be said for that. But,
and you know what? But I mean, think about, and look, the cover band scene is oversaturated with poor quality acts.
Yeah, the cover band's
I'm measuring my words pretty seriously.
Cover band situation, unless you're really taking it seriously, like you're going to go all in on corporate gigs and stuff like that. Like that's the only way to do that, and that's you got to be cool with playing September.
14 years ago, if I was playing a bar, I was getting $100 an hour.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I haven't played in a cover band for maybe 5 years now. That was, man. I remember in between sets once, the drummer comes out and says, "Hey, this guy wants us." It was a 5-piece band. "Hey, this guy wants us to play a wedding," and I said, "Cool, $5,000."
Yeah, which is cheap actually.
And he says, "Oh well, I already told him 1,500."
What?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, buddy. That's why you drummers don't make decisions for anybody.
Well, because it's that was a quote friend band, and there's a lot of people out there that are not. There's a lot of recreational musicians that are out playing covers right now, and they'll do it for near nothing,
and that dilutes the waters for everybody else.
Yeah, and the only people they draw is their friends and their inner circle, and for a lot of bars, that's
good.
That's good, or other. For that particular scene, and
there are definitely
that's really unfortunate.
There's a lot of dudes though who play cover bands, like serious cover bands, who take it seriously, and they can do well doing that. But you're basically gonna be stuck your whole life. You're gonna be playing these covers. That's all you're gonna do, and it's like, I guess if you don't like teaching, then that's an okay path. If you don't mind playing,
well, and that's different.
Doobie Brothers covers forever or whatever it is, it's.
Do you think that there's an increase in quality with the tribute bands versus the cover bands?
Well, because there's such a big glut of tribute bands, to stand out and get gigs, you have to be great. You have to do the whole thing. You have to play the guitars the guys played. Yep. You have to look like the guys a bit. You have to really just sound exactly like the record. I mean, you have to take it really seriously. It's got to be your vocation to do that. You can't be like, I show up with my work clothes and I play the song pretty good.
My buddy Tom Murphy, who also teaches at Skips Music. Mm-hmm. He's got a Pat Benatar tribute band called Invincible. That's awesome.
I thought it was named after the Mark Wahlberg movie. He's big fans of the Philadelphia Eagles in the 70s.
Yeah, that's a Mark Wahlberg tribute band. They do
all Marky Mark covers.
Yeah, they do some funky. They do Good Vibrations. Yep, and they do like push-ups on stage.
I'm so impressed that you even know a single Marky Mark song. I couldn't.
Oh man, you'd be surprised the things I know. But Invincible's really great. Terry Allison, our Weekend Warriors director, sings. Mm-hmm. Tom just built from scratch a BC Rich Eagle replica.
Oh, I get you. Yeah,
it looks exactly like Neil Giraldo's. Yeah. He did a really great job,
and he kind of resembles Neil Giraldo a little bit too. And
tall, fit guy, kind of. Yeah, I mean, they can definitely play the roles, and so that's an example of a tribute band that's actually really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good tribute bands. Sure. I think the thing is, if you get down that path, that's the only. I mean, in the live music world, the only way you can make consistent income is that. That's the only. I mean, unless you have, even if you're a touring band, like say you're a signed touring band. Those guys.
You're playing the hits.
Yeah, but not even the most touring bands don't have hits to play. Like most bands who tour are just be playing in someplace on a Wednesday night for 20 people and try and sell a couple T-shirts, and it's like in a van, like 4 dudes in a van. That's with a trailer. That's most touring artists right there.
Yep.
And if you're more successful, you might have a rider that pays you $2,200, $2,700 at that club. And you might be able to sell maybe $500 to $700 worth of merch, but that's basically split, 6-7 ways. If you have a tour manager, if you have a front of house and lights guy, and the guys in the van, that's only going to basically. The way it typically works is that your guarantee is going to be literally just paying for your place to stay and eat, and the money you're making from merch is what actually is in your pocket. But you can only do so many shows doing that way because it's just not a situation where you can sort of survive on the road indefinitely. You know what I mean? And it's
exactly.
The way that I've kind of looked at it is that, and the way I've approached it with solo band, and most likely we'll probably end up doing with X Ages as well, is I've always taken the approach of I'm going to really just stay regional, just do like sort of the area that I'm in, and then our bread and butter with my band Scott Allen Project has been just doing opening gigs for a lot of nationals. We've done shows with guys like George Lynch and Michael Schenker, UFO, Kingdom Come, Active Defiance, Eric Gale, Steve Morris. We've done shows opening for those kind of guys that are mostly regional, to me, which is basically West Coast, because if you're going to keep a teaching practice healthy and happy, you can't say, hey, I'm going to take the next month off and then come back for 3 weeks and then take another month off.
Consistency is so important in a teaching practice.
You kind of have to decide what you're going to do. You're going to be a road dog and you're never going to be home, which means you'll never have the chance to do any kind of building up your client base, or you're going to just do shows more here and there that are more kind of specialty shows that you want to do and then not play out as much, but do more like recording releases and then do a lot of teaching and sessions, which is kind of the path I've gone. So I got a family too. So it's one of those things where if you want to actually be with your kids as they grow up, you have to do it that way. It's just the way it is. You know what I mean?
And if you don't want to be with your kids when they grow up, then you can go touring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so at least there's choices.
I remember really being eye-opened though, like when we were doing our first few shows, opening for nationals, and the guys that I were looked. I mean, we did a show with Lynch Mob and George Lynch,
Sick.
And it was fun. But I remember seeing how those guys were living on the road. I'm like, oh, there's 5 dudes in just a RV, and that's they're not, they're living off of whatever the writer said they got at the club, and then they're gonna go drink. Like, that's not a sustainable life, man.
Yeah, that's rough.
And I know, because I know the owner of the club. I knew what they were making for their guarantee. And I'm like, going, really?
Yeah.
With all those dudes, and then he was probably pulling in 150 people at that thing, and I remember thinking like, man, even him is like that. That's fine. He's making enough to make a living, I'm sure, and maybe he's just doing it just because he wants to go play. I don't know.
So who knows? And so you got to balance out. How badly do I want to go out and play, and why do I want to go out and play?
Yeah.
And all of those factors.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I think that I look at my teaching business, whether it be like teaching, because I actually teach with TrueFire as well. I teach Zoom lessons, and I teach private and in-person lessons. I look at that as my main business, is that, and then everything else, recording wise, and sessions and stuff like that. I mean, you make money from that, but it's not like that's something you can rely on. Session work is it's like fishing in a way.
It's a piecemeal kind of thing.
Yeah, it just comes and it goes, and you'll have sessions for a while, then you won't do sessions, and so the only thing that you can really count on as a musician is something like that. So either get into a gigging band that does lots of covers, or does like really high level cover stuff like wedding things,
or corporate stuff,
or you just go the teaching route. And then some people will get into a situation where they're playing with like a B level, like national artist, somebody who had like a couple hits in like the 90s or something, and you just be their touring guitar player. You're going to make about the same money either way. Any way you slice it, you know what I mean? Whether you choose to teach, playing covers, or do like the touring thing as well. It's just a matter of, do you have a family? Do you want to stay local? Do you want to, what is your life demand that you do? And that's kind of what decision you
finding the right mix.
Yeah. And I think all that stuff ties into the teaching though, because you have so many different experiences, in the studio or on stage, or recording, writing songs, playing in different bands. That's something that you can bring to the table with a student, and then they can kind of benefit from that.
That's a good point. I think it's really important as an instructor to be an active musician in some way, shape, or form. You could be out gigging all the time, whether you're doing the cover band thing or the tribute thing or an originals thing. Or, for me, the last couple of years has been working on the Ex Aegis album.
Yeah, that you and I are doing.
That's right, which is going to drop very soon.
Yes.
You have to have some sort of creative pursuit. So I definitely think, if you're out there listening and you're interested in lessons, you should at least find someone that's either me or Scott, or
really, that's the only people. You should stop right there.
But you should at least find somebody who is an active musician.
Yes,
I think that helps.
Thank you for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott. Please make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast. Now let's get back to the teachers talking. That talk that they talk. That they do. I don't know what I'm saying. Let's get back to the podcast. One other thing I would say, like I was mentioning earlier, though, is if someone's offering you like an easy fix, like, oh, yeah, we'll just work on these riffs, man, that's all we'll do, or what do you want to learn today? That's a red flag. So what do you want to learn today tells you need to go find a new teacher.
So I'm going to pivot off of that. And what are your thoughts on Zoom lessons versus in person?
Now, obviously, during the pandemic, there was no option. We actually, all of us had to learn how to do Zoom and Skype lessons like on the fly, because it was like, oh, guess what?
Oh, I remember that.
Everything's shut down for the indefinite future, so you're going to have to just get everybody figured out how to do Zoom links and stuff like that. I actually think it's great. I still have some students who I still do Zoom lessons with, because that's just how they prefer it. I have students who have taken lessons with me from all over the country and all over the world who still do that as well. And then I also have the online platform of TrueFire that I use too, which is a little different animal, but I teach people all over the world on that one as well. So I think that there's not a huge drop off. I don't think if I had a very absolute beginning student, then I probably would prefer to be in person, because I can at least put my hands on their hand and like move their hand position, because they can only describe so many times.
Smack them around a little bit if they haven't practiced.
It's like, well, no, put your wrist down. No, down. Put your wrist down.
Put your thumb behind the
comes
neck.
down. No, not over the guitar neck. Down.
Right. No, not in your nose, on the string. No, not in your ear, on the string, on the first string, not the sixth string.
I'll have situations where I'm saying, okay, now take your first finger and go to the second fret on the second string. and they're like on the 15th fret on the bottom.
Oh,
fret.
yeah.
No. Your first finger on the second fret on the second
Yeah,
string.
that whether Zoom or in person, that phenomenon completely blows my mind every time. Even after all these years.
I think,
It's
are you
like
listening to what I'm saying at all? I mean,
yeah, or like somehow it gets scrambled up from my lips to their ears.
Yes.
I don't know what
some
happens.
kind of Klingon.
Well, I mean, they're numbers.
Yeah. Ichuta.
It's very
That's all
right. Yeah.
That's all they heard in their head.
Kapla.
Exactly. Nah, Pudu.
Wow, I think that actually is a Klingon word. So,
No,
I guess I'm the nerd of the podcast.
Technically, Huttese. That's actually Star Wars.
So side note, I know how to fix Star Wars even better.
No, we've covered this. We've covered this in the. Oh, okay. Do you have a new one that doesn't involve 3 dots?
Well, I mean, okay, so Klingons.
Okay.
Introduce Klingons.
Oh, I would like to see
into the
Klingons versus Predators, man. That'd be awesome.
Klingons team up with Predators versus Wookiees and whatever Jar Jar Binks is.
Yeah, those are technically Gungans. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I feel better now about knowing some Klingon. Thanks, man. You know what Jar Jar Binks
There is
is.
no bigger Star Wars fan in the world than me, so I know this stuff inside and out, man.
All right.
So,
okay. Cool.
which I'm not bragging about. Just it's probably more of a confession than anything else.
Okay. That's no. You can, dude. You can. That's fine. We can like different things sometimes.
Yeah.
Not all the time. We have to agree on.
We have a certain
awesome rocking guitar.
That's
but,
true. No, you know what? I don't have
yeah.
a problem with horror movies either. I think that's cool. It's just that I'm much more of an optimistic person. I would say I kind of tend to want to feel good when I walk out of a movie. Like one thing that bums me out when I go see a movie, if it's super depressing, like and then she had cancer and died, and then he just fell apart, and then the end, goodbye. I'm like, what?
I mean, look, I'm an optimist also.
That's true. You are very optimistic.
I find it. I find it reassuring to stare into the abyss and then carry on.
Yes, to
So
plead your hopes and dreams into an indifferent void is really reassuring.
Right, absolutely. I enjoy creating my own meeting that will eventually be obliterated.
That's true. That's true.
So,
I mean, oh my gosh, that's true again. I gotta stop that.
So that's interesting because I really tend to not like Zoom lessons a whole lot. I've found it's much more difficult, even no matter how good my Zoom setup is on my end.
Oh, that's true. The technical side, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a student who's been, who's been with me for 3 or 4 years, like pre-pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when the pandemic happened, I rolled as many people as I could over to Zoom lessons. Mm-hmm. And all of them came back to in-person except for 2. Now, one went to college, so, I don't know what his, and that's a whole separate other conversation, what happens when the kids grow up and go to college. That can be kind of bittersweet sometimes.
Not letting go.
Man, I it's tough. When I first started teaching, one of my teaching mentors, Tommy Armstrong, he said, look, you can't, people are going to quit.
Yeah.
And so you can't ever get too
offended or something,
just it's not that's just what happens. Nobody takes lessons forever. You know what I mean? But I do really invest personally in my students.
It is a different world,
much
huh?
as I can. It is different.
Yeah, because you have a personal relationship with these people. It's not just like a corporate thing where you just you have to invest in them emotionally and try and read them and understand what's going to be the best method of how to teach them. And
you have to. I think. I mean, it's
a personal relationship. It's different.
I mean, I think all good business is personal to some degree.
Yep, it's true.
Right? Or else, I mean, you have to be able to understand and build a relationship with your student or client if you're gonna give them the best service.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? And so, so I have a student right now who, so I teach in person Wednesday through Sunday. Mm-hmm. Right, that's my work week. Right, mm-hmm. Tuesday mornings I have sessions either for X Aegis or I guess now this podcast.
Recording the podcast. Yeah.
Yes, recording this awesome podcast. But I'll categorize that as me time for being musically active.
Working towards something. You know what I mean?
I think it's important to be musically active to be a good instructor, right? So this is time that I invest in that.
Yeah.
So I do Zoom sessions on Sundays, right? And now this particular student, she switched to Zoom lessons, and she's really smart. She, has learned a ton. I'm sure.
Is she
but,
still local? Like she could come take
right?
She's
down. She's down near one of the stores where I teach.
Okay, so
right?
she didn't move to like Wisconsin or something.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Okay.
But since the pandemic, she switched to homeschool. Which, there's another societal thing. I know there were active shooter threats at her high school.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Most high schools have that at some point.
God, right? Can you imagine?
Yeah,
Jesus,
I don't have to.
dude.
I have a daughter in high school. I know exactly.
Oh, right,
man.
man.
I mean?
Ugh.
Yeah.
So I've tried to get her back to in-persons and I've explained it, like, it's what would be best for her, right? Like, we can't get together and jam. I have a whole improvisation program I would like to, from which she would benefit, right?
But that's going to be off the table.
It's off the table because we're talking through computer screens, right?
Also, there's latency going on there too. You can't be entirely in sync. You can never really play together on Zoom.
I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, but I always take a follow the leader approach. Okay, I'm going to play this and you play it back to me. I'm going to play this, you play it back to me, that kind of thing.
Oh, so that's one of my favorite. This is gonna piggyback on the put your first finger on the second fret of the second string. Yeah. So so does this happen to you when I say? So I say, look, okay, repeat after me, and then I'll start playing the phrase. They'll immediately start playing too.
Yeah.
That's not what repeat after me
That
means.
usually like has a situation when I start counting in. Okay, we're gonna play that rhythm. Okay, I'm gonna count us in. One, two. Then they start playing on two. I'm like, oh no. Okay, I'll just stop and stare. I'm gonna say, I'm going to count us in. Let's try it again. One. Brr. It's like, oh, come on. What part of counting the four are we struggling with here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or when you're trying to explain something and they start noodling.
Yeah. And like I always look like it's really not inspiring confidence that you're listening to what I'm saying.
Sometimes I just stop and ask, why are you playing right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's tough. You don't want to be too like strict and call people out, but at the same time, you can't let them just wander everywhere either. You got to try and keep them on the rails.
I try to aim for kind of like a fun, no bullshit.
Yeah,
attitude.
exactly. Which is tough because sometimes no one works with that. Some people work with that, some people don't. You know what's funny when you have a student who is just like, "Yep, okay, cool, let's do this." It's like so amazing. Like, oh, you just are going to do what I ask you to do. That's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like so like refreshing. It's like I can't believe that you're just and you practice this week. Oh my god!
I've noticed that when I'm explaining something and the student repeatedly replies with, "Oh, right." That's how I know they're not listening anymore.
They're literally staring out a window or something. Yeah, exactly.
When the student starts saying right, then they're not listening anymore.
It's when I ask them a question too. I'm like, okay, here we are. We're in F Lydian, and what major scale is that the fourth mode of? And they look at me, wait, what? What? I go, aha! You were not paying attention at all. When did you check out? Like 5 minutes ago? Like how long ago have you been staring out the window? You know what I mean? And it's tough. I always am very conscious there's a ticking clock too. Okay, I got 30 minutes.
And for those of you listeners out there, it's the fourth mode in the key of C.
Major. Yeah,
that's what I meant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people don't know. You guys are smart, though. I'm actually not talking about you guys. Everyone listening to this is a brilliant musician, I'm sure, and totally understood that F Lydian's the fourth mode of C major.
And hey, you know what? If you're the student out there that just wants to play the Green Day song at the party, like that's cool too. But maybe our conversation will inspire you to learn a scale.
Yes, and take playing guitar seriously. That's hopefully one of the things I would say. But
absolutely.
Yeah,
so
it's refreshing though when you have students who like really put into it. And it's so funny. I'll have
certainly
sometimes students back to back where like one student who's just shredding and like playing multi-octave sweep arpeggios and just ripping, and then my next student's like, man, how long has he been playing? I'm like, 3 months.
Yeah, there are those who just like nose to the grindstone.
But he practices 5 hours a day every day. You know what I mean? It's like that's right. And it's kind of, especially like the next students, like say an adult student's been playing for 7 to 8 years, and he's just getting comfortable with his pentatonic scales at that point. And there's this kid who's been taking lessons for like 4 months. It's just like 10 miles down the road beyond them.
Yeah, there's what I call the $10,000 G chord.
Yeah.
That's for the student who only plays when they come to see you, but they also never quit.
Yeah,
and I appreciate the never quitting part.
God, thank God for that. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, so I have this student who, she wants to switch her lesson day, and I don't have another day for Zoom lessons.
Yeah.
But I hate to see her go.
Yeah.
So if there were just a way to get back in person, I don't know. It tugs at the heartstrings.
It does. I've had one student of mine. I have many students who I really loved teaching over the years, but I had one student of mine. It was the hardest one ever. So he stayed with me for 21 years.
Wow.
I kid you not.
Yeah, man.
He literally started taking lessons in like the late 90s and only quit like 2 years ago. and it's like.
Yeah,
I watched him grow up
man.
from like 13 years old to like a 30-year-old guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was like it's such a sad thing to see him go. I was like, I can't believe it, man. I mean, you know, at some point in the last like 3-4 years, you know, okay, the end's coming. He's not going to take lessons until he's 45.
No one takes lessons forever. Yeah. That's right.
So, but it was like a tough one to watch him go. It was kind of, and what's funny about that is that people like will come like, man, he took lessons for that long. He must be a monster. I'm like, well, he can play. Like, yeah. But his work ethic was kind of hit and miss over that time. So he had some things he was really good, and some things he would be, you know, lacking. Is it just wasn't consistency. So,
or maybe they have other interests.
Yeah, that's true.
Know? I've got
who would have that? I mean, electric guitar is the only thing that matters. Know that,
totally.
I mean,
but yeah, I mean, I've got a student who's big. He got big into choreography, and man, dude, he can dance like no one I've ever seen. Right, and he's been my student for maybe 11 or 12 years. Yeah. And, you know, he's about to go to college, so this is his last month, and it tugs at the heartstrings,
It does.
man.
It makes you sad to see him go, but at the same time, you hope. I mean, what I always hope is that they're going to take this information that I'm giving them and carry it forward. And every once in a while, I'll get like a something on social media or something on like one of my YouTube channels. Someone will make a comment. It'll be an old student I taught like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Actually, hell, I was just the other day, I had a guy come on walking up to me, and he's like, Scott Allen.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, I'm like, yes. I'm like, okay, so clearly this is either a guy who's seen one of my videos or someone who took lessons.
Or another one of your stalkers.
Yeah, exactly. One of the many.
Right.
But I remember like, hey, he's like, hey, man, I took lessons from you like 10 years ago. And he was a grown man. And so I didn't recognize him at first. I'm like, oh, and he's like, oh, but this is my name. And I was like going, oh my God, dude, that's crazy. You know, and it happens all the time. I was thinking the other day, I taught.
And to be fair, most of your stalkers are women.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, it's just what it is. You know? And then psychotic, you know, people dressed as clowns. I mean, that's typical. Everyone's got that.
Fun.
Everyone's got the guy outside their house with a butcher knife and the clown.
Whenever there's a disturbance in the neighbor's shrubs,
of course,
just like, oh,
you know, it's the clown guy.
Hey, Pennywise.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's funny. I don't know if this is probably something all teachers, no matter whether music teachers or not. But I always think about like, okay, these people I taught like when they're 15, and it's like 1999, and they were 15. Like, how old is that person now? Like, would I even recognize them if I saw them on the street? Because in my mind, that person's perpetually 15 years old. Like, they're not going to grow.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like. I'll think about that sometimes, because to me, of course, I haven't changed at all. I'm exactly the same.
Yeah, I'm the same
as
dude.
I was
in
1999.
Because
nothing about
we were adults then.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, but that person in my head is perpetually 15. So like when I see someone like that on the street, I don't know who this is. But to me, there's a connection that they made with me, because at that time I made some kind of impact, and that's something that I would say, it's going to sound corny to say, but having an impact on somebody like that is really, really exciting. I've had many of my students who've gone on to go to places like Berkeley and Musicians Institute,
absolutely,
and stuff like that. And it's a really good feeling to know that you kind of help put someone on a path to like being able to be a great musician.
It's rewarding, or even just be a good person. You know what I mean?
Person not give a take. As long as they're a great guitar player, you know what I mean. Who cares about the? It could be They could be macheting people in the streets. As long as they can play those arpeggios clean, I did my job. You know what I mean?
The Folsom Prison House Band, all students of mine. And
once they take the gore from the chainsaw.
What?
I'm so cool. I did my job, man. You played that arpeggio perfectly. Come on.
Yeah,
it's right time.
Yeah, totally.
Once you wiped the blood from the guitar, it was fine. My job is done at that point.
Dude,
you know what
this
I mean?
sounds awesome. Yeah. Man. I want to see that band. Maybe they'll open for King
Diamond.
It's
kind of a weird perversion of gore.
Wow, if you're perverting gore, then you're really doing something there, and that's a total props to gore.
That's true. It's true.
It's not rock and roll if you weren't offending somebody.
True. With that Odorous Maximus or whatever. Come on, that's
yeah. Odorous Urungus.
Oh.
Yes. So the current guitar player is Pustulous Maximus.
It makes me happy. The
bass player is Beefcake the Mighty.
Is that right? Is that really true?
Yeah, I know that. Dude, there's a great documentary about gore on the Shudder channel, the
that
gore
makes
movie
sense.
streaming service.
Yeah.
So
so
I think the other guitar player, his name is Balzac the Mighty.
It's not Balzac the Mighty.
Maybe I'm mispronouncing it. I'm not sure what the intergalactic pronunciation is.
I thought that was like an adult film star, wasn't it?
It could be both. It could be both, and that's totally cool.
Let's get back to the teaching, though.
Somehow we ended up on war. But yeah, another phenomenon. Well, the lesson is primarily about learning how to play music, but for a lot of students, or at least a lot of the students that especially the last couple of years, it's about more than just learning music. I know that during the pandemic, people being able to come to the young peoples particularly who weren't able to go to school, like they were not
Stuck at home
socializing
the whole time. Yeah.
Right. So I began to feel this dynamic of, oh, they're coming here to learn how to be socialized.
Sure. Not look at the screen while they're talking to somebody.
Yeah, and and that's right. And the Zoom lessons, I feel are inferior in that. Well, I don't know, maybe not. I don't know. I just have so mixed feelings about the Zoom lessons.
I feel like it's a tool. I don't think it's good or bad. It's just, if you need it, it's there. I would say generally, though, thinking about philosophies of teaching, to my mind, you always want to be, because I sometimes will come across students who's like, well, I'm really not really much in playing lead. And I'd say that's great. You don't have to be a lead player, but you do need to have some degree of technique because you're going to be limited creatively if you have no technique. So you need to have a certain level of technique. Even if you don't see yourself as being a lead player, you need to have some lead technique because you're going to have things you want to play creatively. You are just going to leave yourself a big gap.
Melody.
Or riffing. Sometimes the riffs might be fast, and if you don't have any scale technique, you're going to be really limited in what you're doing. So you have to take a comprehensive approach to your practicing. You've got to understand chords, rhythms, harmony. You need to have at least to me, the basic lead guitar tools that everybody should have are pentatonic scales, understanding major and minor, diatonic scales, understanding major and minor and the modes. You need to understand arpeggios at least to a degree, and double stops and how they relate to the keys and the modes. Once you have those things down, then you've got a really good foundation that you can go anywhere with and learn any style of music with. The other thing that you have to think about.
Well, and might I just add, all those things are related to one another. So
they are.
We're looking at the same thing from different perspectives.
But you got to at least get to the point where you have all those tools in your toolkit. Now, the reading part, and this is one of the things that's tough when you're having a student coming from like a band orchestra kind of perspective, is that
school band student
is that. If you're learning trumpet or even piano to a degree, they don't really do anything except for method books and learning to read, which they, for some reason, think has something to do with making music in theory. I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Reading is reading. It's just another tool. And to my mind, the way I always approach it with every student is I don't require my students to learn how to read music because they're guitar players. If you're a rock guitar player, you will literally never see sheet music in your life. So having some hours of your week taken that you could be working on arpeggios to work on reading for something you're never going to use, I can't justify. That being said, though, if you are going to study music in some kind of scholastic setting, whether it be in school or in college, or if you're going to go to music school or something like that, obviously reading is a big part of that. You have to know how to read.
And at least understanding some elements of sight reading. So tablature is great because it's very literal, but it doesn't have a built-in
There's
system.
no rhythm represented. That's
right.
Or fingerings for that matter, or anything like that. The other thing about reading too is if you're going to be a professional musician, I strongly feel like you need to know how to read. If you think I want to be a pro musician or I'm going to study and get a degree, you have to know how to read.
Well, if you're going to go audition for anything, they're gonna put a chart in front of you.
Yeah. Well, unless it's a metal band, probably not. But if it's like like a pop band, even then it's probably gonna be more like a lead sheet than really a chart per se. And it's just something you got to be comfortable with reading if you're going to be a pro musician. If you're going to study music at a high level, whether it's college or junior college or high school, you need to know how to read. So it really, I was asking, I talked with parents about this too. I'm like, well, we'll decide reading based on what their goals are. Like, do they see themselves playing in jazz band in high school? Then they need to know how to read. If they're going to play Iron Man with their buddies in their garage, then they're never going to see sheet music, and there's no reason to take that time away that they could be spending on other things. I can't justify that either. And I've known a lot. I mean, the vast majority, I would say we both agree with this, 80% of guitar players don't read music at all. At least 80, 85 maybe.
Of the modern guitar, we're excluding the jazz and classical.
Well, that's the jazz and classical in Canada. That's the 15% that does know how to read.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The rest of it, anybody in the rock, pop world, alternative, funk, R&B, blues world, none of those guys read. So it's one of those things. And that's a very hard thing for somebody who's coming from an orchestral background to understand. It's like we don't read music in guitar land. It's just not something that's part of our culture. You know?
I have a student right now who I'm taking through an improvisational program, and she got a scholarship from her jazz band. One of the smartest, coolest students.
Oh, nice one. That's great.
Yeah, she's great. But it's interesting, so I know that when she's at school band, reading charts and stuff, right? When she's at her guitar lesson, like we're working on jamming together.
Yeah.
There's
really no crossover between those two skills.
So at her last lesson, we went through. We've got a little backing track that has, it's kind of a solo sandwich. Has a solo, then there's room for two solos that we play or improvise, and then it repeats that melody, and then the track is out, right? So, and we analyze, the theory. We look through. Here's how to read the charts.
Here's the chord changes. This is the key we're in.
Here's what your options are. Can you use this mode? Check. Yeah. Can you use this mode? No. So we do all that work anyway. So at her last lesson, right, we went ahead and went through it, right? I took the first solo, she took the second solo. But then I turned the music stand around so she couldn't see the chart anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then, hey, it's your turn to take the first solo.
Yeah.
And yeah, she played a lot better.
Yeah, well, because you're using a different part of your brain when you're doing that too, and that's the thing. If you are so used to having a chart in front of you or trying to read, when you get into a situation where it's like, hey, man, I'm just going to jam. You got to use a whole different skill set. You know what I mean? And it's to me, I'd rather build that skill set because learning to read is just about sitting down and doing it. There's really not anything to it. Just sit and put the time in. There's not any magic trick to learning how to read music. It's just you got to do it. The other thing you can spend a lifetime and never perfect. Like learning how to improvise and how to use things and be creative and build melody. I think creativity is something that has to be fostered and developed. No one just walks out of the womb creative. You have to.
And that's the third category that I tell my students we're going to focus on. So
which is
segue,
great.
Scott.
Exactly. It's perfect. Well, I was trying to support you there, Ryan.
Thank you. You always do, man.
Yeah, but it's one of those things that I think that's. I always tell people it's like a muscle you have to develop. It's like you don't just like have creative thoughts. You have to develop those things. They're not going to just happen. You know what I mean? And also applying tools like understanding how to combine pentatonic and diatonic scales and then incorporate arpeggios is not going to just happen. You have to try and spend time improvising to do that. And I'll never forget when I was in music school, I had a bunch of friends of mine who would come up to me and go, man, how do you improvise like that? Like, how do you do this? And I go like, well, I mean, I just play, man. But then what I didn't realize is like my whole childhood, I spent like 3-4 hours a day just jamming to like Dawkins and Van Halen CDs
and experimenting
all day long.
Oh,
you know
dude,
I mean?
the experience of man, I spent my first few years of high school playing every King Diamond album front to back,
and
like along with it, as
right?
if I were in the band.
Exactly, same thing. I'd be put on like Megadeth Countdown to Extinction. I would just solo after Marty solo. I would take a solo. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And I did that for hours every day for the years when I was a kid. And by the time I got all my tools in my belt and I was in music school, I had already had 10 years of experience doing that. So when I go to improvise, it's like, yeah, I've done this a million times. This is I do this all the time. And I can tell people who didn't do that because then they would kind of really be very. It almost reminds me of like watching someone walk down the street saying left foot, right foot.
Yeah.
It was like you could really see the thought process, and it wasn't just flowing. You know what I mean? And
I feel like I find that more with my adult students. Like, there's definitely a difference between teaching teenagers, and there's a difference between teaching kids, teenagers, and adults. With kids, you just have to embrace the madness. They're just little crazy people.
What's great about kids, though, is they're used to learning. They're used to being in that. Here's your assignment. At least the ones I've dealt with. Like they understand this is your week's assignment. Work on this. They've got homework every day they have to do at school. You know what I mean? I find that's and teenagers similar.
I just assume that children, particularly those. In fact, I usually don't take students until they're 10 years old.
Like just because you hate children, is that the main?
Well, I mean, no, I don't hate. Children are little crazy people who are bad at doing things. So, like, you can't ask them to not be that.
That I have to say, maybe the fact that I've got 2 kids helps because
Probably.
I've spent much of my life trying to talk to a 2-year-old and explain to them stuff. So, like, when I have a 5-year-old, I've taught kids as young as 5.
And cheers to you.
But I understand because I had kids. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. Not only that I have kids, I've spent many years at like birthday parties with like 20 other 5-year-olds.
Yeah, dude, I have literally never changed a diaper.
Oh my god, I've changed so many, man.
Dude, I'm so sorry. Man.
It's all good. Hey, it's part of being a dad, man. You can't abdicate that shit. That's part of your job as a dad is to change diapers and be up.
But hey, man,
tired.
if I'm ever in like a horrible accident and like lose control of my I'll call you if I need my diaper changed.
And I will make sure to call someone else to make sure to come help you. Like Thomas, come on, man. Brian needs you, man. I'm in the middle of something. I can't make my way over there, but no, I find that adults are way harder on themselves. I think that there's this weird expectation like I should be great at this right away.
Yeah, because they're already good at something else in their lives.
Yeah, and they've worked towards it. They probably have degrees and stuff. I'm like, but you've never done this. It's like the same reason you can't go and be awesome at surfing day one, or like I almost describe learning guitar as like trying to learn how to juggle while speaking French. Yeah. You have to. There's a physical component, and then there's like an intellectual component to it as well. It's very mathematical and language oriented in terms of the parts of your brain that you have to use.
2 + 2 is 5, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I suck at math, but yeah.
But I think that like for adult students, they come to this weird expectation that I should be awesome right away. And I always tell people, dude, you got to back that off big time because it's not going to be great for a while. You have to just keep showing up for work and keep chopping wood. You know what I mean? And you'll be good, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I think it's a totally bitter pill, and I think it's easier to swallow when you're like 10, 11, like when we were starting. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I think the adults are probably more inundated with the all the ads and stuff.
That's totally true.
Learn how. I had someone mention a quote method. I'll use air quotes. Air quotes. A method called soloing without scales.
Yeah, which is not
what a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, no, that falls into that category. Anytime someone's offering you a shortcut, you should just be very dubious. You know what I mean? It's not. There are no shortcuts. Everybody listening, there are no shortcuts.
There are no.
You
shortcuts.
have to do the work. There's no to
work.
it, and you know this. You know this. It's just a matter of you have to be honest with yourself. What's funny?
Stop lying to yourself.
I'll have some people come in and say, I want to be able to play Eddie Van Halen solos. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's start here, and then I'll show you how to build it, and we'll get maybe a third of the way through the process, and they go, yeah, I'm just not feeling inspired to practice. I'm like going, well, what's going to be inspiring is in about 6-8 months when you get great at this and you can actually do the things I'm asking you to do.
I had a kid say to me a couple of weeks ago, so my mom wants me to ask you, what we can do to motivate me.
Nothing. Just get motivated, dude. Want to play guitar good.
Yep. I said, dude, motivation, and I tapped him on the chest. Motivation comes from in here. Yep.
I can't do anything or cajole you to be motivated.
That is correct. That is correct. So cool, man. Well, this is good. Oh, well, and just to cap things off, so, well, yeah, I mean, I guess we kind of covered everything. We'll see if I still have my Zoom student after this week.
Yeah, so she might listen to this podcast and just rage quit.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's also hard to verify. I think that's important as an instructor. I need to verify that you know this at least better than you did
because you can't fail people. You can't give them a test and then say, oh, I'm sorry, you failed. You have to retake the course again.
Yeah, because this isn't school. It's just, so we'll see, man.
You know what I do, though, is I just let them know as harsh a way as possible how disappointed I am in them. Just like, you have so failed me.
Right, totally.
You are,
listen, you're a failure.
You're the person I'm going to tell everyone else the rest of the day about. I want you just to know that. You know that inside.
Like, you know what?
You failed me and everybody, really, your family, all of them. You failed everyone.
Yeah, like, I used to think I was good at my job until I met you.
Yeah, exactly. And now I know that there's really nothing I could have done. No one could do. You're...
either that or I've completely lost faith in my abilities as an instructor, all thanks to you.
If you pardon me, I'm going to go throw myself from a third-floor window now.
So, I'll do it. I'll do it. Yeah. So anyway,
by the way, that never happened. That was dramatic.
No, that was drama. That was our Yep.
Hang on a second.
We'll be
scene.
Yes. Well, for Halloween, we'll be doing our guitar take on H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds about when the evil flannel wearing aliens came down to Earth.
Yes.
And destroyed popular music for. Ever.
Well, what would happen in that movie, though, is the aliens would come down and destroy popular music, and then everyone would side with the aliens. Like, oh my God, the aliens are so right. We should have been listening to this all along. The flannel is the best.
Dude, when the tripod aliens shoot their electricity beams, the sound that the beams make would be they would just be like Eddie Vedder voices. Yeah, exactly. Well, that was kind of in a higher octave.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
We can't help but harmonize.
That's
folks.
true. It's true. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this rambling this podcast. But hopefully you got something out of it. This is a teacher's perspective on what it's like to teach and how to learn. So hopefully you have some tools that you're armed with now to decide who's the charlatan as an instructor and who is not.
Right.
The only people that you can ever trust really are Ryan and myself. That's the only two people.
Hint: the charlatans are not us.
Yes, every other person's a charlatan. We're the only ones telling you the straight business. We got it all.
That's right. We got the real dope. All right. Thanks, everybody. This has been
Ryan and Scott's Rock Guitar Confidential. Should we do it after? It should be Rock Guitar Confidential with Ryan and Scott, or should it be Ryan and Scott's Rock Guitar Confidential?
Well, or Scott and Ryan. I think Scott and Ryan has a... I'm okay with your name first.
Ryan and Scott's alphabetical. It just feels more right to me.
Man, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to take a poll.
Okay, that's true. That sounds... Never mind.
All right.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. Until next time. Peace.
Bye.